Good afternoon, world. Good afternoon, universe. Today is June 20th, 2021, and it is the summer solstice, so happy solstice to everybody. And it's Father's Day, so happy Father's Day, Dad, and all the fathers out there. And then recognition of the masculine energy, the divine masculine or divine father energy or willpower, which is necessary that we find that because we've seen so much of the negative aspects of the male or masculine energy over the last couple hundred years or couple thousand years, so not to mention just the last year. So this report's going to be centered around the Capricorn full moon, but really quick, let's just, for context, note that we just had a solar eclipse in Gemini at 19 degrees 47 minutes of Gemini. And it was conjunct Mercury Retrograde, and it was also square to Neptune. So we're dealing a lot with, it kind of flipped the switch, and we're dealing a lot with communication. We're dealing a lot with our conflicts outwardly and inwardly with, illusion out there and illusion inward. And the positive and negative aspects of how we can use and not use or be used by those illusions or delusions. A lot of that stuff going on in the world at the moment. And Venus, as the higher esoteric ruler of Gemini, seeks to synthesize the opposites. So Gemini is the twins. Gemini is information, it's kind of the synapse in the brain. It's the Mercury connects the dots, delivers the message associated with merchants, exchange, delivery. So all forms of communication and travel. Quicksilver, very fast. And so at the time of Mercury retrograde, and that's where we're at right now, we're almost to the end of it, which is great. Because I've noticed this Mercury retrograde over the last couple of weeks has been a really intense or very, glitches in communication, massive slowdowns. There was even, failures with airline radar equipment, which grounded lots of planes. And I won't get into all that mundane stuff, but this has definitely been a trial, this Mercury retrograde, to take a step back and just try to observe and allow things to move, because it's kind of like when Mercury retrogrades, it's just the energy amplifies so much, and it makes me think of like the mind. Like our minds move at a particular speed very quickly. It's kind of like in the movies, they're likened to move at about 24 frames per second. And that's kind of what we see normally with movies. And when you insert images or content at a higher speed rate than 24 frames per second, that's where you get into the subliminal messages and so forth, because it's too quick for the eye or for the senses to pick it up, yet it does register to the subconscious. So when we have a Mercury retrograde, things are moving so quick that the energy is so amplified that it's kind of like it's moving quicker than the speed of our mind. And that's why our mind has trouble tracking a lot of the, quick, intense information and energy that's coming in. So, I hope you've made it through this Mercury retrograde all right. We're getting close to the end of it. So, because that was conjunct the solar eclipse, it's part of the energy that's going on. It's signaling that we need to review where we're coming from and where we're going, slow our thinking down, or I guess in the sense that I just talked about, go into a place that's outside of the analytical mind, so that, you're more in alignment with like soul, go into meditation, do breath work, do yoga, so that you can actually, you slow yourself so down so much, this is a weird way of thinking about it, that you can actually see the information that's moving quicker. It's either that or some way you're accelerated to the point where you can actually see that. So Capricorn full moon coming up, 3 degrees, 28 minutes on Thursday, June 24th. It's going to happen around 11:39 a.m. Pacific time. And some of the aspects at the time of this full moon is that the full moon makes a quintile to Mars, and the full moon makes a sextile to Jupiter. So we'll talk about it more, but there's a lot of Mars or Martian energy and a lot of Jupiterian energy at the time of this full moon. And we want to remember that this full moon in Capricorn is like, it's an outpouring and overpouring. It's a culmination point. It's a full expression, like a prime expression of that solar eclipse that happened in Gemini. You know, and I see this full moon in Capricorn as like an initiation point. You know, we're definitely at an initiation point. I'll come back more to that in a second. So a lot of Mars energy, and then there's a lot of Jupiter energy. And, you know, we have Sun, Septile, Uranus, and then here is a lot of different Mars aspects at the time of this full moon that are just going on right now. So Mars opposite Saturn. Mars is also square to Uranus, and that's happening also while Saturn is square to Uranus. That's kind of a bigger theme that's coming in. That's you know, past versus future. You know, society, the world is kind of wrestling with what it takes to hold on to the important aspects or the core principles of the past or the conservative, and what is supportive and loving of society. And then there's the conflict of moving towards the future and what we want to embrace going forward into the future, and let go of old forms and old ways of thinking that are outdated, that are not serving us anymore. So some of the other aspects, Mars is making a sextile to Mercury, and then Mars is sesquiquadrant Neptune. So there's a lot of Martian energy going on right now, and I'll talk about that more in a second. Back on, well, let me say first, the esoteric ruler of Capricorn is the same as the exoteric ruler, so it's Saturn. So there's a lot of Saturnian energy right now. You know, with Mars opposite Saturn, it's the relationship of, you know, Mars wants to take this energy outward and get things done, make things move, initiate things. And this opposition to Saturn is slowing that down and saying, you know, things have to get done right. Things have to be fully checked before things can go forward. So there can be some frustration right now with the desire to want to move forward, especially with that Mars in Leo. And so I want to mention that back on January 12th, 2021, the new moon in Capricorn, at the time of that new moon in Capricorn on January 12th, Mars was square to Saturn. And right now, Mars is opposite Saturn during this full moon in Capricorn. So it's sort of a culmination that started all the way back then with the Mars squaring Saturn. It's kind of like a point break, you know. It's kind of like the element where the initiation has built up and crested. The wave has crested, and now it's coming down. And that basically means that it's time to commit to what you're doing. It's time to fully engage and move forward, but you're not going to be able to move forward unless you're doing it in a very mature and sober way. And that means owning your experience. That means do what you fear, face your fears, and own your experiences, and then take that and move it into the outer world. You know, move from the point of owning that experience. So, you know, you align with spirit, you create relationship with spirit, or even if you're a person that doesn't believe in anything spirit or spiritual, you ground yourself and you create a centeredness and a sobriety so that you're not scattered, and then you move forward, then you take it forward. So it's a posture that you kind of take. So that being said, the previous Mars retrograde, I'm going to talk a little bit about Mars today because there's so much Mars energy. The previous Mars retrograde occurred back on September 9th, 2020. And it went all the way till November 13th, 2020. And, you know, a lot of that had to do with reviewing the lowest quality aspects of the masculine and having to go through a really hard time of becoming more aware of the lower aspects of the masculine, which is impatience, you know, being hasty, anger, frustration, militarized thinking, warlike expressions. You know, it was like shortly after that period, well, that coincided with the election, and you know, so many negative aspects of the masculine that we saw back then. So basically it was going through a process of becoming more aware of Mars energy, and a lot of Mars energy has to do with routines, patterns, habits, cycles, you know, obsession, moving in circles. So that's, you know, basically a habit. And it was the painful process of becoming more aware of these lower grade habits or routines or addictions that we all have in one way or another, having to face them and look at them whether we liked it or not. And now it culminates, like I said, this point break, it culminates, the wave has crested, you know, with Mars right now square to Uranus, and then Mars opposite Saturn. So it's basically, we're going through a test. Mars is doing its test right now to see if it can get right the higher aspects of its own nature. And those higher aspects, you know, tie into a relationship with Neptune. Neptune, in a way, is kind of like a higher octave of Mars. And so what we do is we go from, you know, lower aspect of Mars to the observation kind of aspect of Mars, to where Mars isn't necessarily passive or inactive. It's just that Mars makes the choice to walk off the stage. You know, Mars in Leo right now is definitely being on the stage. And Mars goes up to the balcony and becomes the observer and takes the observer perspective, looking down on the stage so that it can witness the characters on the stage instead of actually just being a character on the stage. And I'll say that with that observation perspective, Mars learns how to be the observer and the director. Whereas most characters that are just on the stage are sort of in an unconscious state of acting on the stage. But when Mars can go to the observer stage, it can actually gain that higher observational perspective, which is where we see some of the greatest or most genius actors that there are, because they're able to obtain other perspectives. We're kind of like Mars, the Aries part of Mars, becomes aware and gets in touch with its polar complementary opposite Libra and relationship. It can actually see what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes or on somebody else's path. And so there becomes this ability to relate and to understand others. And it's not any longer just about I, me, mine. So, you know, Mars is going through that test right now. And where we can go right now, if you can get the observer part of the Mars energy right, is to go to the next step even higher than the observer, which is the server. So it's going from the observer to the server, and server means basically service. And I look at this full moon in Capricorn. Capricorn has to do with initiation. This full moon, if you look at it with the regular like Aries rising chart, well, that means that this full moon is a culmination at the highest point of the chart. So that's the midheaven, and that's the 10th house, and that has to do with our work in the world and what we truly are meant to do in the world. You know, so you might be going through a process right now of either working on what you've realized is your true calling in life, or what you're supposed to be doing in the world. Or maybe you're going through a little bit of confusion and figuring out what it is that you really want to be doing, because what you're doing right now doesn't resonate with you, or it sort of feels lifeless or soul-sucking. So right now is a huge opportunity to actually become aware of that process, of the higher aspect of Mars, either going to the observer point or going to the next point, which is the server or service point. And that basically means, like, you know, doing service in the world, something that can make a difference to the world, and or change the world, or help others, others that are in need, others, you know, it's basically going beyond that lower quality of Mars, which is usually just focused on I, me, and myself. So, you know, it's in that sense, when Mars goes to its higher energy, it becomes in rapport, it has a relationship to Neptune. And that's where, you know, the Leo energy really kind of shines through for Mars right now, is that, you know, Leo is associated with the sun. And Neptune is the spiritual part of the sun in the solar system. And with that connection to Mars, really quick, is that when Mars goes to its higher qualities, it takes on Neptunian qualities, because it's associated with the esoteric ray, the sixth ray of devotion and idealism. So that's where Mars, when it can focus its action, it can actually, instead of just being oriented towards what can I get for myself, or, you know, what can I acquire or take from the world, it's, you know, what you can devote. It's the key word is devotion with Neptune, because it's all about love. And what can I devote to? You know, what qualities of myself can I devote to putting into action to make a difference in the world? So, you know, with this Mars and Leo, there's a focus on the self, and the wanting to come into the higher self, the wanting to be more self-conscious, to bring light to some of the hidden natures of ourselves. And with Leo, it's a fixed energy, it's a fixed fire sign. So it's very sustaining. So it's not like the Aries fire, which is like a quick burst or like a stab of, you know, energy to initiate something or bring something forth and then it burns out. It's the fire which sustains. It's the fire, it's the flame, the eternal flame which continues. You know, I see a little bit of association with that to Vesta, the protector, the guardian of the flame, the sacred fire. And along with that, you know, purification. So it's purification in a deeper sense. The deeper you can come into a greater awareness of yourself, the more sustained that fire is in a way. And the more sustained that fire is, the more purified you become. So, you know, Viktor Frankl said, what is to give light must endure burning. So what is to give light, that which gives light must endure burning, and the intensity. the uncomfortableness that comes along with that. And with this Leo, fixed fire energy, it's about not burning out. It's about sustaining that fire, keeping it steady, feeding it. And when we feed it, you know, we're talking about the higher aspects of Mars. We want to monitor our thinking. We want to monitor our emotions. We want to monitor our actions. We want to monitor how we speak. You know, we want to be more conscious of language. We want to be more conscious of action in the world. And, you know, because what we do affects not only ourselves, but everyone and everything around us, the entire world. So it's coming into that higher consciousness. So what is to give light must endure burning. And it's about continuing that flame. So Mars is, you know, desire in action and divine love in manifestation. So how we abuse or use our will correctly or incorrectly. Those are some good questions for you to think about right now. You know, it's about manifestation. It's about divine. Mars is divine love in manifestation. It's divine love in movement. Mars goes out into the world, and, you know, it's the soldier that's sort of taking the orders from higher up, which would be like Neptune, Uranus, and so forth, Jupiter. And it's taking those commands and it's bringing it out into the world and manifesting it and giving it life. And sometimes death, you know, it's taking away. So right now can be a very potent time of giving life to yourself, you know, creating a new life, bringing new things that you've been dreaming about to life, into your life. And it can also be about taking away or loss of things. But the key is in keeping that flame burning, no matter, you know, how blissful or how intense or uncomfortable. It's about holding your position and holding it with love and with the right kind of willpower, which basically means direction and focus towards going into the future, and continuing to do so and not being, like, you know, knocked off the path, so to say. So, you know, a lot of this Mars energy has to do with want and desire. And there's a lot of, like, really amazing aspects, practical and esoteric, that we can talk about as far as desire goes. And with desire, you know, it's been said in some works that we should learn or train ourselves to not desire, not to want. You know, that's very Buddhist or very Zen. Because the way it is, you know, and I've learned this through some of the conscious language work, is that life or universe is operating on such a different level than our mind, or a higher level, that the way it moves and communicates to us, through others, is different than how our mind thinks. So when it comes to desire, it's like when you say, I want this, the universe sort of translates that. The way the universe hears that is it hears you saying, I want this. And to want this over here is basically meaning that you acknowledge that you do not have it, that it is not with you. And so the universe sort of acts on direct archetypal commanding. So when you say you want something, you're basically telling the universe, I don't have this. You say, this is very hard to explain in a way. If you say, I want this, you're saying, I want to continue not having it, essentially. You're affirming that you don't have it, and you're also affirming that you want to continue not having it. So, you know, there's different ways you can learn to use your language or your thinking on how you approach, you know, the world. And desire has been, you know, so much of a epidemic in its own way, or pandemic in its own way, just like fear. You know, so much negativity has come out of desire. Desire is not ultimately bad. We're here because we desire to be here, and we're here because we desire to have experiences, and to desire, you know, we desire to be loved and to love and so forth. But when it comes to the material plane, you know, there's a lot of distortion and shadow around people wanting too much, and the inequality through desire of either having too much or not enough, and then the hatred and the negativity that's generated from it. So, you know, the idea is to work on not being attached to desiring and wanting really anything in particular. That's that Mars in the observer perspective. And then when you can get to that point, you can take it even higher. You can go to the, like I said, the service aspect. So I think I'm going to make this is part 1, and then I think I'm going to make a part 2, because the timing of it is probably going to be longer than expected. So thank you, much love. My name is Billy Kyle. I'll come back here in a second with part 2. Goodbye.